Hello and welcome to another episode of the Global Reset with me, Prashant Nair, here on CNBC TV18 Prime. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping met in China over the weekend for the first time since the Galwan clashes plunged relations into a crisis. This is the meeting which continues to be discussed threadbare, and it continues to dominate geopolitical discussions here in India and overseas as well. The optics suggested a thaw. Talks of Panchsheel, renewed flights and even the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. But the fundamentals remain fraught. Indian officials are clear border peace is the foundation for any real reset. This outreach came against the backdrop of US tariffs on Indian exports and rising pressure on energy trade. For Delhi, the meeting was as much about hedging global bets as it was about mending fences with Beijing. Is this a turning point for India-China ties or a symbolic embrace masking unresolved mistrust? Joining me in a short bit from now will be Sumit Ganguly, columnist at Foreign Policy and senior fellow at Stanford's Hoover Institution. That's the conversation, that's the voice you will hear from over the next 20 minutes or so. But before we go any further, let's quickly recap what has happened on the global front last night, overnight, as we always do. Starting off with a fresh statement from US President Donald Trump on trade with India. Trump posted this on Truth Social, his social media platform, claiming India has offered to cut its tariffs to nothing. This comes after Washington imposed 50% levies last week as punishment for India's purchases of Russian oil. Trump wrote, and I quote, "Until now, it has been a totally one-sided relationship, and it has been for many decades. The reason that India has charged us such high tariffs, the most of any country that our businesses are unable to sell into India. It has been a totally one-sided disaster. Also, India buys most of its oil and military products from Russia and very little from the US. They have now offered to cut their tariffs to nothing, but it's getting late. They should have done so years ago." End of quote. I mean, do you sense a little bit of lesser confrontation in that sort of tweet, that post on social media from President Trump? I think so, as do many that we actually got opinion from. Meanwhile, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro once again talked about how India is the Maharaja of tariffs, he called it that, and said India's oil trade with Russia is nothing but profiteering. Listen in.
The problem is that India literally is the Maharaja of tariffs. It has the highest tariffs of any major country in the world, and it's in denial about that. It tries to tell everybody out there that that's not true when it is demonstrably true. So they should engage with us. They haven't done that as Japan, Korea, the Philippines, Indonesia, the European Union has. They simply think they continue having their way with us. President Trump's not going to allow that. Now, Putin gives India a discount on crude. They refine it, sell at premium prices to Europe, Asia, and Africa. It's nothing but profiteering. India cannot stand on the thin reed that somehow they need this oil to run their cars or cool their homes. It's false, just simply false.
Well, Peter Navarro also talked about Prime Minister Modi's relationship with China's Xi in light of conflicts between two countries. This, of course, comes at the back of the meeting in China over the weekend.
It was a shame to see Modi getting in bed as the leader of the biggest democracy in the world with the two biggest authoritarian dictators in the world, in Putin and Xi Jinping. That doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure what he's thinking, particularly since India has been in a Cold War and sometimes a hot war with China for decades.
Meanwhile, in an interview to Fox News, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that the SCO, which is the summit in China, which Prime Minister Modi attended, is a long-standing meeting and largely performative. He added that India's values are much closer to the U.S.'s than to China's or to Russia. Said that India and the U.S. could get the issue resolved ultimately. Bessent added that the U.S. would be examining additional sanctions against Russia this week, and he basically said that all options are on the table. But all in all, I mean, if you just read through what President Trump said in his social media post, and of course, Scott Bessent for the second time in about last 10 days saying that ultimately we're going to resolve these issues between India and the US. I mean, I think maybe the tone, the hostility, that seems to be coming off a little bit, just a tad, little bit. We're going to slip into a quick commercial break here. That's the wrap up as what happened last night. But as promised, Sumit Ganguly, who is the senior fellow at Hoover Institution at Stanford University, he's going to be coming on the other side of this quick commercial break, and we're going to talk about what to make of the thawing in relations as was seen in that meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping. Stay with us. Mr. Ganguly, great to have you with us here on the program. Thank you very much for your time. At the outset, I mean, I'd encourage our viewers to go to the Foreign Policy Magazine website and read your piece. And I think the headline itself of that piece makes it very clear that you are in the skeptical camp. You are of the view that, I mean, this is more optics rather than any meaningful, durable, sustained change in policy direction. So let's just start with what you made of the meeting, Mr. Ganguly.
Well, I think this gives both countries a certain amount of breathing space. That is more than evident. However, this should not be construed as a breakthrough in Sino-Indian relations. The ongoing difficulties in Sino-Indian relations, the enduring rivalry, the unresolved question of the border dispute, all remain. These differences have been papered over because of the exigency that both countries face at the moment with Trump's rather unprecedented tariffs.
Can I ask you, why do you think this cannot be a bit of a, durable change in direction of travel, Mr. Ganguly? I mean, I agree. I completely get the skepticism, but is it, what probability would you give? Both sides would obviously be a little skeptical, would be a little wary. They'd want to take it step by step, but at least this is a start.
It's certainly a start, but a start to what? China is not going to concede on its claims along the Himalayan border. China is not going to end its strategic partnership with Pakistan, which impinges on India's security. China is not going to stop trying to make inroads into Bangladesh, which has strategic consequences for India. All of these challenges remain. They have not been addressed. And let us not forget that during Operation Sindoor, China provided real-time intelligence to their Pakistani counterparts. Chinese missiles and aircraft attacked in the Indian Air Force and its capabilities. All this cannot be simply set aside because there's a momentary convergence of interests.
Point taken. So you're saying that, the relationship is still going to be defined by border tensions, Mr. Ganguly?
Oh, not just border tensions, but China's long-term relationship with Pakistan, and particularly this government in Pakistan, which is doing the bidding of the Chief of Staff of the Pakistani Army, Asim Munir, who seems to have an undying hatred of India, which is more than evident from his recent remarks. We simply cannot divorce ourselves from these fundamental differences that characterize Sino-Indian relations.
Indian officials, of course, have emphasized border peace at the border first. I mean, leaving the Pakistan issue on one side, you don't see China willing to prioritize disengagement at all.
Oh, I do see them prioritizing disengagement, but bear in mind those troops that are deployed along the border, the tanks that are deployed along the border, the missiles that are deployed along the border can all be brought back to bear at fairly short notice. Over the last decade, the Chinese have invested significantly in infrastructure along the border, all the way up to the line of actual control, which thereby enables them to move artillery, to move tanks, to move infantry at fairly short notice. They can easily withdraw these troops and these military deployments, but bear in mind they can be once again returned to their forward positions at fairly short notice.
Mr. Ganguly, let me ask you, let me just step back a little bit, ask you a fundamental question. How much do you think, obviously it's difficult to put numbers to something like this, but how much do you think Trump's big tariffs influenced, basically pressured and pushed India into this meeting with China? I mean, although I must point out, this started sometime in December last year, much before President Trump actually announced those tariffs, starting with the Liberation Day ones and then later on. So the process seems to have started before President Trump's tariffs. But how much do you think it has kind of sort of pushed this and the urgency of this forward, Trump tariffs?
Oh, I'm completely convinced that Trump's tariffs and the outrageousness of these tariffs, in considerable part, precipitated this movement. Trump's tariffs were catalytic, particularly the second tranche, the second 25%. I think led India to adopt this position, even though efforts at normalization had been underway and talks had been underway. But you notice the dramatic shift that has taken place in Indian foreign policy in the wake of Trump's outrageous tariffs that have been imposed on India, and practically on a personal whim.
Yeah, yeah, I completely take that. So this is just hedging one's bets in the face of what you call outrageous Trump tariffs.
Oh, there's no question about it that Modi was pushed into a corner by Trump owing to these tariffs, which will have a deleterious effect on India's economic growth. And under these circumstances, some attempt at reducing tensions with China, even if it does not mean a resolution of the underlying sources of discord, were almost inevitable.
Mr. Ganguly, do you think this summit it's almost as if President Trump has brought sort of rivals together in that sense? Do you think this perhaps may cause a bit of a rethink in Washington, or not really?
It's extremely hard to predict Trump's actions because his approach to foreign policy making, his approach to security, his approach to strategic matters is so whimsical that it almost all depends upon his particular sentiments on a given day or a given week. There seems to be a lack of a grand strategy that he has formulated beyond this vague notion of America first, which is largely a transactional approach to American foreign policy. This marks a significant departure from practically any American president in the last 50 to, in fact, I would argue not just the last 50 years, since the end of World War II.
So we don't know. We just don't know, right? How this is going to be taken.
It's extremely difficult to predict how he's likely to behave.
Just to go back to China's point, right? I mean, actually, if you look at effective tariff rates on countries, India is at number 2 position, 34% effective tariffs because there is exemptions, etc. China is at number 1, effective tariff rate of 42%. So, that's the other bit, right? These are the two highest tariff countries by President Trump. Do you think that, and by the way, before President Trump came into power, there was almost bipartisan agreement between both Republicans and Democrats in the US. I mean, they agreed on one thing, that perhaps China is the rival to watch, right? That, I'm not sure if that still is the case. And of course, China knows this. Do you think the other sort of, common point of tariffs, limited access to US market, making it harder to effectively compete in US, which is pretty much the largest market in the world, can result in a change in attitude in China as well? I mean, at the end of the day, China is, of course, a large economy, very large economy, second largest, but it's got its challenges and it wants to keep growing. Don't you think this prompts a bit of a durable change in mindset in China as well?
The Chinese are superb tacticians. They will shift their position as it suits them. They have no moral compunctions whatsoever. They will trade with the devil if necessary. They will simultaneously walk away from the devil if it suits them. The Chinese are master tacticians, and India should not be lulled into a state of complacency by the pieties that Xi Jinping is mouthing at the SCO Summit.
Yeah. No, I'm sure our officials, I mean, they're seasoned people, right? I mean, so nobody is going to walk into something which kind of hampers their interests in the long run for some short-term optics. I think that, I guess we can be rest assured. But how do you see things progressing from here? I mean, what are the next steps, Mr. Ganguly? So this has happened at a prime minister level. Behind the scenes, I'm sure there'll be other stuff happening. I'm talking about India and China. What would China want from India? What India wants from China? I think some of it, of course, we've been reporting access to those rare earth magnets, technology, especially in some of the high-tech industries where China is, of course, at par with the US. I mean, some would say in places like new energy, etc., perhaps a little ahead. What is your sense?
Well, obviously, Indian businessmen who have significant stakes in China will want access to the Chinese market. The Chinese would want, in turn, certain access to the Indian market, a restoration of something like TikTok, for example, in India. They would like to continue with their investments in India. They would like to benefit from Indian IT developments. So there is some scope for mutual benefit, but the scope for mutual benefit should not be allowed to obscure the fundamental differences that still characterize the relationship between these two countries. Those differences are strategic and they are related to India's security. And despite the astuteness of Indian diplomacy, one should not be carried away by China's pious statements.
The question for India, Mr. Ganguly, is can India afford simultaneous kind of friction with both the US and China? That's the question. Or would you suggest, I mean, one kind of sort of waits this out with President Trump without doing anything?
Well, one should still make overtures towards Trump, despite his very idiosyncratic ways, for the simple reason that he is still the president, assuming his health holds, for the next 3.5 years, and one cannot wish the United States away. So it is best to keep certain channels of communication open to the United States without completely rolling over and conceding to Trump's demands, which strike me as being insensitive and thoughtless and feckless. On the other hand, one should maintain a certain level of circumspection in all one's dealings with the PRC, because one should not overlook what happened in Doklam, in Galwan, and post Pahalgam.
Mr. Ganguly, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you here on CNBC TV18 Prime. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Well, that's it on this edition of the Global Reset. Thank you very much for staying with us. More coming up in just a bit.